You know, when you grow up in an estate in a town where the streets are named after your relatives, you don't expect things to go this way. Hidden underneath a tarp in a truck bed with $50 in a phone that I'm ditching after I post this. I'll be quick because I don't have much time. Something messed up is going on at Evener Preparatory School. Teachers are murdering students, and I think some of the parents are in on it. Evener is an ultra-selective, expensive prep school nestled in the woods. My parents sent me there a year early, claiming it would help me adjust after my older sister, Margie, ran away from home. I was having some behavioral problems, I'll admit it. I missed my sister, and it hurt to think she cared more about getting high than she did about us. But by my senior year, I was settled in. I didn't like everything about Evener, but I had friends and it felt like home. At the start of the spring semester, my best friend, Whitney DuBose, came to me looking puzzled. Instead of a hug, she handed me an envelope. She said that over break, a random woman had come up to her at a Starbucks and handed her the letter, asking her to give it to me. She would have tossed it, but the woman appeared to be sane, if not nervous. Reading it was a trip. The writer claimed to be Margie, and said that she didn't run away because of drugs, but because she thought Evener teachers were kidnapping students. She told me that they had a secret room somewhere in the gymnasium. They had a weird code phrase, "The end is nigh." She told me where I could find her and begged me to leave Evener too. At first, I threw the letter away in disgust, convinced that it was a sick joke. No one had heard from Margie in years. I assumed that she was dead. Later though, I fished the letter out of the trash and I hid it in a book. If it really was Margie, I couldn't risk losing it. I forgot about the letter because Gabrielle Tafari committed suicide shortly after that, drowning herself in one of the ponds on campus. It cast a suffocating shroud over the school, in part because her little sister Vivian had just started there. Poor Vivian walked around wide-eyed after that, squeezing her books, her lunch tray, or laptop in a white-knuckled grip, as if she was afraid they'd fly away from her too. That's when I first started noticing. 1. None of the teachers seemed fazed. After a brief assembly acknowledging Gabrielle's death, it was back to business as usual. 2. None of them seemed concerned that it was the second student death in a few years. My sophomore year, Abby Emmons died while driving drunk, and I remembered whispers about another girl who had hung herself. I hadn't worried about Gabrielle. It was a competitive school, and after all, it was all well known that we were under a lot of pressure to succeed. Whitney used to joke that Evener's motto should be, "Send us your coal and we'll give you back diamonds." So I decided to talk to Vivian. We had the same lunch hour and I just made it a point to sit near her one day. I explained that I had gone through something similar, and if she ever wanted to talk, I was around. And then I casually remarked that it didn't seem like the teachers were taking it very seriously. I knew my hunch was right when Vivian's eyes widened. She motioned for me to lean in. Vivian blurted out that she had tried to tell Mrs. Gibson, our school counselor, but Mrs. Gibson concluded that she was traumatized and directing her grief in unhelpful ways. Her parents agreed and warned us if it didn't stop, they would pull her from Evener. She told me that when they were younger, Gabrielle had almost gotten carried away by a riptide during a beach vacation, and she had been terrified of water ever since. "I don't think Gabrielle killed herself," she whispered. "If she was going to do that, she would have never, ever done it the way that she did." Her eyes shimmered as she looked away. Impulsively, I reached across the table and I squeezed her hand. After talking to Vivian, I went to my pre-law professor, Mr. Turley. He liked me and he was new to Evener, so I thought that he was trustworthy. I was wrong. His expression remained blank as I explained. I left out Margie's letter though. He responded in a measured tone, but I could tell that he was fighting something. "Maya, I'm very disappointed," he said. "This has been an extremely hard time for Vivian and her parents, and you're stirring it up with conspiracy theories. I expected more from you." My mouth dropped open. "Sir, Vivian is. Enough. Not another word. I'll let this go, but if you don't, I'll have to tell Mrs. Gibson." The conviction in his voice made me give up, but an idea popped into my head as I went to leave. I turned and said, "The end is nigh." Mr. Turley flushed red and glared at me, eyes dark before slamming the classroom door. The next afternoon, Whitney came to my dorm crying. "My parents aren't letting me come back after spring break," she sobbed. "They say that I can't finish out the year. Me or Andrea." Andrea was her little sister. "The hell?" I exploded. "Why?" "I don't know. Some bullshit about Gabriel and how they don't think it's a healthy environment. Can you at least walk at graduation?" Whitney shrugged, her lips trembling as she fought off more tears. "I don't know." In a flash, she had me in the tightest hug that I had ever gotten. With Whitney gone, I had nothing better to do than investigate whatever was happening at Evener. I started with students. A few hours at the library looking at old copies of our school's newspaper taught me not only about Gabrielle, Abby, and the girl who had hung herself, but a few others too. Suicides, car accidents, overdoses. It seemed Evener lost a student every few years, either accidentally or intentionally, and it was always the oldest of two sisters. Margie's warning lurked in my mind. I stared at the swirling dust motes, and for the first time, I believed that it might be true. After spring break, I started spending my free time in the gym, pretending to practice basketball. Really, I was just waiting for somebody to leave the utility closet unlocked. My break finally came in early May. I heard Mr. Catania put away the janitorial cart, but I didn't hear the telltale jangle of keys as he left. Heart pounding, I tried to appear absorbed with the task of achieving a three-pointer. As soon as I heard the door close, I ran to the closet. It looked completely normal at first, and I was disappointed. Just shelves, cleaning supplies, and the breaker box. But when I searched, I found a console buried beneath a pile of sponges. It slid open upon contact, illuminating the space with a cool blue light. "There is a better way," a female voice said smoothly. My palms started sweating. If I did the wrong thing, I could trip some alerts and ruin everything. I stared at the screen and I racked my brains. "The end is nigh," I finally said in a low voice. There was a soft hiss behind me. Turning, I saw a hidden door had opened to an entirely new room. At first glance, it appeared to be a smaller space with a few stainless steel lockers. But when I opened one of the lockers, I jumped back and I crashed into the wall with a yelp. It was some kind of humanoid robot. Hanging from special mounts, its metal face reflected the fluorescent glare back at me. I surveyed it for a minute, afraid to get too close. And then I pressed the small button on a panel built into the robot's chest. It lit up and I heard the small whirring of minuscule equipment. Words appeared on the screen. "Better Way Industries." It faded and was replaced with a list. "Revert to prior template. New draft. With a trembling finger, I hit revert to prior template. The metal began to glow, and then shimmer like the surface of a lake. It sculpted itself until the generic form came to resemble a young woman. Color leaked through the new shape, and textures appeared. I let out a strangled scream when the facial features emerged. It was Gabrielle Tafari's face. Her hair and skin glimmered with droplets of water. I whimpered and I pressed my hands to my mouth as my eyes filled with tears. Margie and Vivian were right. Somebody at Evener had done something with Gabrielle. I tried to calm down, but I was interrupted by the unmistakable sound of a conversation. I closed the door to the secret room, but if whoever it was decided to come in there, I was screwed. I danced in place panicking as the echoing voices grew closer. When I heard the closet door open, I held my breath and I waited. There were two adults talking, but I couldn't discern who. When I heard, "There is a better way," I practically flew to the stainless steel lockers. As quietly as I could manage, I wedged myself inside the one holding the Gabrielle dummy. My stomach dropped to my shoes when Mr. Turley and Mrs. Wong, the principal, entered the room. From what I could see through the narrow grate, Mr. Turley looked worried, and Mrs. Wong looked pissed. "How does she know?" Mr. Turley finished. "We're still checking, but for now, she's not exhibiting any behavior that causes for true concern," Mrs. Wong said. "Don't worry." "What do you mean, don't worry?" "We monitored their cell phone and internet communications and we saw nothing suspicious. Yet Maya somehow found out about the Day of Reckoning, and she was bold enough to say it to my face." My face was pressed up against fake Gabrielle's. She smelled like chemicals, and her body felt clammy but soft like real flesh. I tried to breathe slowly, ignoring the antiseptic odors burning my nostrils. "I don't think she knows anything about that," Mrs. Wong said, the irritability in her voice rising. "I think she just had a hunch, maybe from her parents. Tony and Elise were never as guarded around their children as we recommended, and you confirmed it because you couldn't control yourself. I still think it was a mistake to turn the DeBose girl early." My heart shot into my throat at the mention of Whitney. There was a sound of metal scraping against metal as Mrs. Wong opened something. "When you've spent half as much time working towards this as I have, Eric, I will pretend to be interested in your concerns. Didn't Ray make it clear to you what your role would be when he recruited you?" "Yes, Well, unless you want evidence to show up linking you to Gary Green's death, I suggest that you follow my instincts," Mrs. Wong snapped. "I've run this school and kept us all out of trouble for over a decade, haven't I? I know Ray told you what happened at the other sites. If you disobey my instructions, we could very well have another Highway 50 situation on our hands." There was a pointed silence. Mr. Turley said nothing. Mrs. Wong spoke again, more gently this time. "Please, trust me, Eric. You don't know how hard we all have worked to get here. We're weeks away. Don't lose faith now. There is a better way." Mr. Turley sighed. "The end is nigh." The room went quiet as the door slid shut behind them. I knew that I had to leave after that. I didn't even go back to my dorm. I ransacked one of the locker rooms for cash and extra clothes, and I left on foot. I followed the road out of Evener for a couple miles, staying a few yards into the woods the whole time. When I reached the main road, I dragged a fallen branch into the street, hid myself at the side of the road, and I waited. It was another 90 minutes before I snagged a ride. I got lucky too, and the fifth car that stopped was a pickup with an open truck bed. While the driver moved the branch out of the way, cursing, I slipped into the back and I huddled down, I know where the train station and the bus depot are in town, and I know where my sister is. Margie will know what to do. My parents, Whitney's parents, the Terfas, Mrs. Wong, Mr. Turley, the way they've chosen leads to death. But it isn't too late for me to choose a better one.